Welcome back. It's Friday, and I've got another Franco film for you. Today, we're going to look at probably a film that is the most controversial in Franco's filmography, in that it's one of these films that's really a mess, quite honestly, and it's also, as is with a lot of Franco films, clouded in mystery and confusion and all sorts of behind-the-scenes drama that made the production, in all fairness, not entirely the fault of Jess Franco. But what I'm talking about is The Revenge in the House of Usher. So this was shot in 1983, or released in 1983, initially in Spain, to an audience that apparently hated it. It came out at a bad time, let's face it. I mean, the early 80s with Friday the 13th, slasher and gore films was what was selling. And this film was a concept that really should have come about much earlier. And it was just unfortunate bad timing. But essentially what happened was Franco really wanted to film a true depiction of Edgar Allan Poe's Usher story. I mean, a lot of people talk about Edgar Allan Poe and his short stories, in this case, the Usher story, but a lot of people haven't really read the story. What he wanted to do was actually create an expressionist interpretation that was faithful to Poe's short story of Roderick Usher. And that expressionist film, in that the whole concept of it being a poem, kind of along the lines of an F.W. Murnau modern interpretation of the story, really, from a timing standpoint, was extremely ill-timed. I mean, in 1983, this was just not going to sell, and it didn't sell. So what happened was the producers, Eurocine, took it and started to cut it up and try to make it a much more commercially viable film. And that's what we have here in this cut here from Image Entertainment. The Euroshot collection is the U.S. release. The wider title for this film was Neurosis, Revenge in the House of Usher. But basically what happened was Franco was really going up against a bunch of obstacles when he made this film, including things like even the cinematography. The original cinematographer wanted to shoot things with a lot of filters, and that went against Franco's concept of I want an expressionist film. I want a film that has natural lighting. So he ended up being the cinematographer himself and the director in this film. He used a lot of natural light, and it's gorgeously shot. I mean, if you look at these scenes in the film, you can see where he was going. But what happened was the producers got a hold of it when it was a flop in its initial release and re-edited the thing. So the film got re-released like in 1988 as under this title. And also there's a version of this in France that has a couple extra scenes of some gore and things like that, nudity and gore, that really kind of tried to make the film more commercial, and it further deviated from the vision. Eurocine decided that, well, we need to make something that's more commercial, so they took the awful Orloff scenes and just inserted probably every scene that Howard Vernon was in. About 15 minutes of the awful Dr. Orloff is retold in this film. The storyline in this film is that Howard Vernon plays Roderick Usher, and he's an aging, crazy old man living in this dilapidated castle that's basically fallen down around him, a la the story in Edgar Allan Poe's story. But interspersed with that, he's also a maniac killer. And he's been killing off prostitutes and basically taking their blood and putting it into his daughter in an attempt to rejuvenate her. And as he's telling this backstory, you're getting all the old footage from the awful Dr. Orloff to kind of emphasize the point, which really people interpret this as, well, it's just a rehash or remake of Dr. Orloff. Well, that wasn't the intent. The intent was to make an expressionist, faithful adaptation of the short story by Edgar Allan Poe. And the producers just got a hold of it and did that at their attempt to make this thing more commercial. So if you watch this film and you just kind of put out of your mind the 15 or 20 some odd minutes of The Awful Dr. Orloff and just focus on the scenes that were shot in the early 80s, you're going to get, I think, a taste for what this thing looks like. But the reality is that we'll probably never know because that Spanish film was lost. As I understand it, there was a fanboy in Spain, a Franco fanboy in Spain, that attempted to take pieces of this original Spanish shot film from DVD and VHS, and he tried to cobble together a fan-based film of this film of Franco's, but I don't know if it's available or who's seen it. I think it was shown in May of 2016. But yeah, I mean, it's once again, it kind of creates the mystery and mythology around this film is typical Franco. You just don't know which version we're watching or whether this was the truly intended version. But I think in this case, we know for a fact that Franco did not intend this to be the film. It ended up being a mess, which he admits. And one of his things he wished he had done before he died was to put this film back together in the fashion of A Virgin Among the Living Dead, which he was able to do. But it's a shame because you can see elements of this. It would have been extremely fascinating film if it had been kept in its entirety the way Franco intended. And hopefully, maybe one day it'll appear and we'll be able to see it. So the storyline here is Howard Vernon. He is 80 years old, over 80 years old at this point in this role, but he really looks good. He almost looks like, to me, looks a lot like Jonathan Frid from Barnabas Collins in this film. Very pale and ghastly looking. And he's just a madman. He's just insane. He's almost got like a Tourette syndrome. 1 minute he's really nice, the next minute he's biting your head off and cussing you out. He's living in his castle with Linda Romay as his servant. And she did a fantastic job. Her role was relatively limited, but she did a fantastic job in this thing. He is visited by Antonio Mayans, who plays Alan Harker. And Alan Harker is like an old student protege of Roderick Usher, a doctor. And he basically is the one that's there trying to figure out what's going on. He has to be mentioned because he really was extremely wooden in this film. I think a lot of people that watch this say this is a boring piece of steaming crap that's dull and uninteresting. And I can see why they say that. A lot of that credit goes to Antonio Mayans. I thought he was terrible in this. But I thought Howard Vernon and Linda Romay were outstanding in this. And if you think about Howard Vernon at 80-some years old, when you watch this film in that context, you'll get a much greater appreciation for what he did in this film. But the film does follow, with the exception of the awful Dr. Orloff interposition and backstory, or flashback scenes, if you will, the story of Edgar Allan Poe's pretty faithful story to the Usher story. You've got the collapsing castle, and really Franco, as director and cinematographer, did a fantastic job of using natural light and really taking in all the aspects of the castle. The on-set locations in Madrid, Spain, and Andalusia, Spain, that they used were fantastic. Beautifully shot and interesting to look at. Haunting and atmospheric. Daniel White is back with the music of the film, and he Once again, it added this haunting atmospheric element to the film. But I thought that the lighting in this was outstanding, and it really was very much a tribute to Roger Corman, who Franco's certainly admitted on numerous occasions that he's a Roger Corman fan, and he liked those gothic set pieces that Corman directed in the 60s. So he really played a great tribute to that, as well as made an honorable attempt to be faithful to the Poe story. It's just the producers got a hold of this and tried to commercialize the film, and now we got the mess that we have, which is Neurosis, Revenge in the House of Usher. Even having said all those things, it is a mess. It's one of his messier films. I definitely recommend it for fans of Franco, or if you're a fan of Roger Corman's Usher film. You ought to take a look at this, because I think it's in some respects it's a much more faithful adaptation. Just don't get digressing off into the 15 or 20 odd minutes of flashback footage from Awful Orloff. If you can just put that out of your mind and watch the newly shot film in the 80s, that I think you'll get a much better, deeper appreciation for the film. So this is a pretty light on special features. You just DVD, and it's got a trailer, not a whole lot there. Hopefully one day we will get a real definitive release of what Franco intended, but for now this is what we have, and unfortunately it's kind of a miss, with the exception of the outstanding performance by Howard Vernon. So that's going to wrap up my review for Revenge in the House of Usher. I still say, if you have an interest in Franco or films that are variants of kind of the Roger Corman Usher story, check it out. It's worth it. All right. Thanks for watching.